Helios Spire did not just float in space. It presided over it. A marvel of post-war architecture, the station resembled a silver needle, threading the eye of a storm, orbiting the massive swirling gas giant, known to the locals as the Titan. On the upper decks, where the diplomats and the wealthy resided, the view was a breathtaking panorama of violent orange storms and crushing gravity, safely observed through reinforced diamond glass. Down in the engineering rings, however, the view was mostly gray bulkheads, recycled air ducts, and the flickering blue light of failing holographic advertisements. Adrian Hale preferred the gray bulkheads. They made sense. They followed logic circuits and load-bearing equations. Unlike the upper decks where politics flowed like expensive wine and was just as likely to leave a stain, the engineering sector was honest. Adrian sat in the cramped cafeteria of the Stellar Academy, his datapad displaying a schematic of a sublight thruster he was trying to optimize for his thesis. He was a young man of average height, perhaps a little on the lean side from forgetting to eat meals with messy brown hair that perpetually looked like he had just pulled a VR headset off his skull. He tapped the screen with a stylus, frowning. "You are going to burn out the intake valve if you route the plasma that way," a voice said. Adrian did not look up. "If I route it the standard way, I lose 3% efficiency. I would rather replace a valve every 6 months than lose thrust during a gravitational slingshot." He finally glanced up. It was Cale, a fellow engineering student with cybernetic implants along his jawline that hummed faintly when he was stressed. Right now, Cale looked stressed. "Forget the thruster, Adrian," Cale said, sliding into the seat opposite him. "Did you check your messages? The housing administration just purged the wait list for the dorms. A glitch in the allocation algorithm." Adrian felt a cold knot form in his stomach, a sensation entirely unrelated to the synthetic protein paste he was eating. "What do you mean, purged?" "I mean deleted," Cale whispered, leaning in. "Gone. And since your lease renewal was pending the system update, you are technically currently homeless." Adrian dropped his stylus. It clattered loudly on the metal table. "That is impossible. I paid the deposit 2 weeks ago. I have a confirmation code. It is Alpha 97. "It does not matter," Kyle interrupted. "The administration sent out a blanket apology. They are refunding the credits, but the rooms are gone, snapped up by the new diplomatic envoys arriving for the Peace Jubilee." Adrian scrambled to open his personal messages. There it was, a blinking red notification icon that looked like a drop of blood on his screen. He opened it. The text was polite, bureaucratic, and devastating. "Due to an administrative error, your housing contract has been voided. Please vacate your current pod by 1800 hours today. We apologize for the inconvenience." 1800 hours. Adrian checked the time. It was currently 1400 hours. He had 4 hours to pack his entire life and find a place to sleep on a station where a square meter of floor space cost more than a kidney. "I am dead," Adrian murmured. "I am actually dead. I cannot afford the commercial hotels in the transient ring. They charge 200 credits a night." "You have savings, right?" Kyle asked. "I have enough for a student dorm," Adrian said, his voice rising in panic. "Not a luxury suite, and certainly not enough to put down a first and last month deposit on a private apartment in the core sectors." He needed a miracle, or a very cheap, very terrible hole in the wall. 2 hours later, Adrian was sitting on his suitcase in the hallway of the academy, scrolling through the public housing network. He had been rejected by 3 automated systems and 1 sentient slime mold that claimed he emitted too much anxiety heat. The available options were grim. There was a storage closet in the cargo bay that smelled of ozone and fertilizer for 500 credits a month. There was a shared bunk with a nocturnal species that communicated by screaming at ultrasonic frequencies. And then there was the listing at the bottom of the feed. Room available. Sector 12. Ring 4. Spacious. Private bath. View of the Titan. 300 credits a month. Adrian blinked. 300 credits. That was less than the subsidized student dorms. He read the fine print expecting to see a catch like, "Must donate blood weekly," or "Atmosphere not oxygen-based." Instead, there was a simple note in bold text: "Tenants must be quiet, respectful and tolerant of nocturnal activity. Warning: co-occupant is a Fenry veteran. Must be comfortable with shedding and occasional growling." Adrian swallowed hard. A Fenry. The war had ended 10 years ago, but the images were still burned into the collective consciousness of the galaxy. The Fenry were 8-foot-tall lupine bipeds, a warrior race from the moon of Vargos. They were fast, strong, and terrifyingly efficient in combat. During the border wars, they had been the nightmares of the human infantry. And now, one of them needed a roommate. "Do not do it," Kale said, looking over Adrian's shoulder. Adrian, seriously. A Fenry in the civilian sector that has to be a dishonored exile or a mercenary. You will wake up with your throat ripped out because you chewed your cereal too loudly. "I do not chew loudly," Adrian defended weakly. "And look at the price, Kyle. 300 credits. I could actually afford to eat real food occasionally." "You will be the food," Kale countered. Adrian looked at his suitcase. It contained his clothes, his datapad, and 3 boxes of antique model starships that he had spent years assembling. He looked at the time. 1600 hours. "I have no choice," Adrian said, standing up. "It is either the wolf or the airlock." He tapped the request viewing button. Sector 12 was known as the Old Ring. It was built during the first wave of colonization, before the sleek aesthetics of the modern Federation took over. The corridors here were wider. The lights hummed with a yellow tungsten warmth, rather than the sterile white LEDs of the Academy, and the gravity plating felt a fraction heavier. Adrian stood in front of apartment 4B, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The door was solid steel, scratched near the bottom as if something sharp had tested the metal. A neighbor, a small, multi-eyed creature that looked like a walking artichoke, scuttled past him, giving the door a wide berth. "Good luck, soft skin," the creature hissed. "The last one lasted 6 hours." Adrian took a deep breath. "I am Adrian Hale," he told himself. "I am a systems engineer. I deal with logic. Fear is just a biochemical reaction to unknown variables." He pressed the buzzer. A moment of silence, heavy and thick. Then the sound of heavy locks disengaging. Thud, thud, click. The door slid open. The room inside was dark, the only illumination coming from the massive circular window on the far wall that framed the swirling orange storms of the gas giant outside. Silhouetted against that violent backdrop stood a figure. She was enormous. That was Adrian's first thought. Not just tall, though she easily cleared 7 feet, but powerful. She wore a simple gray tank top and loose tactical trousers, but the muscles in her arms shifted like steel cables under a coat of sleek silver fur. Her ears, pointed and tufted with black, swiveled toward him. A tail, long and thick with muscle, swept slowly behind her, not in a wag, but like a rudder steadying a ship. She stepped forward into the light of the hallway. Her face was a landscape of sharp angles, a muzzle that could crush bone framed by a mane of silver hair that was tied back severely. But it was her eyes that pinned Adrian to the floor. They were gold, glowing faintly in the dim light, with vertical slit pupils that dilated as they focused on him. "You are the applicant," she said. Her voice was a low rumble, a tectonic grind that Adrian felt in the soles of his boots. It wasn't aggressive, but it carried an inherent threat, like the idle of a tank engine. "Yes," Adrian squeaked. He cleared his throat, trying to drop his voice an octave. "Yes, I am Adrian. I saw the ad." The Fenry sniffed the air. Her nose wrinkled slightly. "You smell of fear and solder flux." "I am an engineering student," Adrian said, clutching his bag strap. "The flux comes with the territory. The fear is, well, you are very tall." She stared at him for a long moment, unblinking. Then, surprisingly, she stepped aside. "Enter. Take your shoes off. If you track mud on my floor, I will throw you out the airlock myself." Adrian hastily kicked off his boots and stepped inside. The apartment was shocking. Based on the exterior and the reputation of the species, he had expected a den bones animal hides chaos. Instead, the place was immaculate. The floor was polished to a mirror shine. The furniture was sparse but high quality, arranged with military precision. There wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. It smelled faintly of pine and antiseptic. "I am Ria Talcor," she said, closing the door. The sound of the locks engaging again made Adrian jump. "Pleasure to meet you, Ria," Adrian said. He looked around. "The place is incredible. For 300 credits." "I do not need the money," Ria said, walking to the kitchenette. She poured a glass of water, the glass looking like a thimble in her massive clawed hand. "I need the housing authority off my back. They require multi-species occupancy for this sector to maintain tax incentives. I need a warm body to occupy the second room. You need a place to sleep. It is a transaction." She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "Rules. 1. No loud noises after 2200 hours. My hearing is sensitive. 2. Do not touch my food. Meat is expensive, and if you eat my protein rations, I will look at you as a replacement. 3. No guests. I do not like strangers." "Reasonable," Adrian said quickly. "I study most nights. I am quiet. I am practically furniture." "We will see," Ria said. She narrowed her eyes. "You have a name human, beyond Adrian." Adrian froze. This was the part he hated. This was the part where he usually lied or mumbled or tried to change the subject. But Ria Talcor did not look like someone who accepted mumbling. And this was an official housing contract. He couldn't use a fake name. "Hale," Adrian said softly. "My name is Adrian Hale." The reaction was instantaneous. Ria's ears flattened against her skull. The fur along her shoulders bristled, standing up like electrified wire. Her tail stopped moving completely. The golden eyes flared, the pupils contracting to needle-thin slits. A low sound began in her chest, not a growl, but a vibration that rattled the glasses on the shelf. "Hale," she repeated. The word sounded like a curse in her mouth. Adrian took a step back, his hands raising instinctively. "Look, it is a common name. Very common. Like Smith. Or Jones." "It is not common," Ria said, pushing off the counter. She took a step toward him, looming. "Captain Jace Hale, the butcher of Moon 6, the man who ordered the orbital bombardment of the Talcor nesting grounds." Adrian winced. He hated the title, the Butcher. To the humans, his father was the shield of Terra. To the history books, he was a complicated strategic figure. To Adrian, he was just the reason people looked at him with either hero worship or hatred. "He was my father," Adrian admitted, deciding that lying to a predator was a fatal error. "But I am not him. I build navigation systems. I do not command warships. I just need a room, Ria. I have nowhere else to go." Ria stared at him. Her mind was racing a chaotic storm of memories. The fire falling from the sky, the screams of her pack, the name Hale whispered with dying breaths. Every instinct in her hunter's brain told her to tear this boy apart, or at least throw him out into the corridor. But then she looked at him. Really looked at him. He was trembling. His pulse was visible in his neck. He looked about as threatening as a wet towel. This was the spawn of the monster. This scrawny, pale thing with ink stains on his fingers. A dark, twisted curiosity took hold of her. If she kicked him out, he disappeared. If she kept him here, she could watch him. She could learn if the rot of the father lived in the son. And perhaps if he proved to be a monster in disguise, she would be the first to know. The growl in her chest subsided, though the tension in her shoulders remained. "Room 2 is on the left," she said, her voice icy. "First month's rent is due now. Do not make me regret this, Hale, because my regret usually involves violence." Adrian let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "Thank you. I swear you won't even know I am here." Moving in took less than an hour. Adrian's room was smaller than the main living area, but it had a desk and a narrow window. He unpacked his few clothes, set up his small shrine of model starships, ironically, keeping the model of his father's flagship, the Vanguard, deep in the bottom of his trunk, and tried to calibrate his mood. He was alive. He had a room. He had a view of a gas giant. Sure, his roommate was a 7-foot wolf woman who despised his bloodline, but the rent was fantastic. He spent the evening avoiding the common areas. He could hear Rhea moving around in the living room. The sounds were heavy, the thud of weights being lifted, the sharp shing of metal being sharpened. He decided to skip dinner rather than risk a kitchen encounter. By 2300 hours, the apartment was silent. Adrian brushed his teeth in the small ensuite bathroom, changed into his worn-out pajamas, and crawled into the narrow bed. The mattress was firm, which he liked. He lay there listening. The station hummed the deep, rhythmic thrum of the life support systems. Outside his door, silence. She is just a student, Adrian told himself. Just a person. A very large, scary person with sharp teeth. But civilization holds us together. The war is over. Exhaustion finally overtook anxiety. Adrian drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of starships burning in the atmosphere and golden eyes watching from the dark. He woke up with a gasp. It wasn't a noise that woke him. It was that primal lizard brain instinct that screams when a predator is near. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with static. The room was dark, lit only by the faint, ghostly blue light of the gas giant filtering through the window. Adrian opened his eyes. Rhea was there. She was standing right beside his bed, looming over him like a gargoyle. She hadn't made a sound. In the darkness, her silver fur looked like smoke. But her eyes were twin lanterns of bioluminescent yellow, floating in the dark, staring down at him. She was close, uncomfortably close. He could feel the heat radiating off her body. He could smell the scent of ozone and wild pine. Her muzzle was inches from his face. Adrian's brain short-circuited. He didn't scream. His throat was too tight for that. Instead, he let out a high-pitched, strangled wheeze and scrambled backward, tangling himself in his sheets. He rolled off the mattress and hit the floor with a loud thump. "Do not eat me," he yelped, holding up a pillow as a shield. "I am mostly bone. I have high cholesterol." Rhea did not lung. She did not roar. She simply straightened up, her silhouette towering in the dim light. She looked calm, almost clinical. "Your heart rate spiked," she said. Her voice was a low murmur, barely louder than the hum of the ventilation. Adrian peered over the pillow, his heart hammering against his ribs like a jackhammer. "My heart rate spiked. You are standing over me while I sleep. You look like the Grim Reaper's pet dog." Rhea tilted her head, her ears twitching. "I heard your breathing change, rapid eye movement. Signs of distress. I came to ensure you were not dying. It causes a lot of paperwork if a tenant expires on the first night." "I was sleeping," Adrian hissed, untangling his legs from the sheets. "People sleep. Sometimes we have nightmares. We do not need a giant wolf hovering over us." Rhea took a step back, her tail giving a single, slow swish. "I was observing. Humans are fragile. Your respiratory systems are inefficient. I wanted to see if the air filtration was sufficient for your weak lungs." "My lungs are fine," Adrian said, standing up and trying to salvage some dignity, though it was hard when wearing pajamas with little cartoon rockets on them. "Please, just knock or send a message. Do not stand over me watching me sleep. It is terrifying." Rhea's eyes narrowed slightly, the golden glow dimming as she stepped back into the shadows of the doorway. A strange expression crossed her face, something between amusement and calculation. "You smell of fear again, Hale," she said softly. "It is pungent." "I am terrified," Adrian admitted. "You are terrifying." "Good," Rhea said. "Keep your heart rate down. The noise is annoying." She turned and vanished into the hallway, moving with a silence that shouldn't have been possible for a creature of her size. Adrian stood in the middle of his room, clutching his pillow, his chest heaving. He looked at the door. He looked at the window, where the storm raged on the gas giant. 300 credits. He whispered to himself a mantra of survival. 300 credits. 300 credits. He climbed back into bed, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He stared at the open door, waiting for the golden eyes to return. They didn't. But as he lay there trying to force his heart to slow down, he couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't just rented a room. He had walked into a trap. And the worst part was the trap had very nice amenities. From the other room, he heard a sound. It was low, rhythmic, and deep. It sounded like a growl, but slower. Rhea was snoring. Adrian stared at the ceiling. God help me, he thought. I am living with a monster, and she snores. The next morning, the sun, or rather the artificial day cycle lighting of the station, poured into the kitchen. Adrian stumbled out of his room bleary-eyed and desperate for caffeine. He had slept a total of 4 hours, most of it with one eye open. Rhea was already awake. She was sitting at the small kitchen table, eating raw meat out of a metal bowl. It was a massive slab of something red and sinewy. She tore into it with precision, her sharp teeth shearing through muscle fiber with disturbing ease. She looked up as Adrian entered. She was wearing a loose training shirt that showed off the terrifying definition of her shoulders. "Good morning," Adrian mumbled, moving towards the coffee maker. He tried not to look at the meat. "You talk in your sleep," Rhea said, not stopping her chewing. Adrian froze with the coffee pot in his hand. "I do not." "You do," she swallowed a chunk of meat. "You were muttering about integration variables and thermal exhaust. It was incredibly boring. I almost suffocated you with a pillow, just to make it stop." Adrian poured his coffee, his hand shaking slightly. "It is a stress response. I have a lot of work." "Sit," Rhea said, pointing a claw at the empty chair opposite her. Adrian hesitated, then sat. He wrapped his hands around his mug, using the heat to ground himself. "We need to establish boundaries," Rhea said. She wiped her mouth with a napkin, a surprisingly civilized gesture, given the carnage in her bowl. "You are a Hale. I am Talcor. Our names have history." "I know," Adrian said, looking down at his coffee. "I know the stories." "Stories?" Rhea laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I live the stories, boy. I was 6 years old when the sky burned. I remember the smell of burning fur and the sound of the dropships." Adrian looked up, meeting her gaze. The gold in her eyes was hard cold. "I cannot change what he did," Adrian said quietly. "And I cannot change who I am. But I am not here to fight a war that ended 10 years ago. I am here to get my degree and leave." Rhea studied him. She was looking for the lie. She was looking for the arrogance she associated with his father's name. But all she saw was a tired, caffeinated student who looked like a strong wind would blow him over. "Fine," Rhea said. "But know this, Adrian Hale. I am not just a student. I work security for the station. I have clearance levels you cannot dream of. If you bring trouble to my door, or if I find out you are sending data back to Earth about me or my kind." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that tectonic rumble again. "I will eat you, and I will not cook for you first." Adrian swallowed. "Understood. No trouble, no spying, just engineering." "Good." Rhea stood up, picking up her empty bowl. "Now, clean your dishes when you are done. I am going to the gym. If you touch the thermostat, I will break your fingers." She walked out of the apartment, the door swooshing shut behind her. Adrian sat alone in the silence of the kitchen. He took a sip of his coffee. It was bitter and too hot, but it felt real. He looked at the empty chair where the giant wolf woman had been sitting. He looked at the spot of blood she had left on the table from her breakfast. He reached out and wiped it away with his thumb. 300 credits, he said to the empty room. 300 credits. He finished his coffee, washed the mug, and dried it until it squeaked. He then went back to his room, opened his datapad, and looked at the picture of his father he kept hidden in a locked file. Captain Jace Hale, standing tall in his uniform, looking like the hero the galaxy said he was. "Thanks for the legacy, Dad," Adrian muttered. "It is really helping with the roommate situation." He closed the file, picked up his bag, and headed out to class. He had survived the first night. He had survived the first breakfast. Now he just had to survive the rest of the semester without becoming a chew toy. As he walked down the corridor, he didn't notice the shadow watching him from the ventilation duct above, or the golden eyes tracking his movement until he disappeared into the lift. Rhea Talcor was not done observing yet. The hunt for the truth had just begun. Living with a Fenry was less like having a roommate, and more like cohabitating with a highly disciplined shedding storm system. Adrian Hale had been living in apartment 4B for 3 weeks. In that time, he had learned several immutable laws of physics that were not taught at the Stellar Academy. First, Fenry fur possessed an electrostatic charge that allowed it to cling to surfaces that theoretically should repel matter. Second, Fenry's idea of a light snack involved enough protein to sustain a human family for a week. Third, and most distressingly, Rhea Talcor had hearing so sensitive that she considered Adrian's mechanical keyboard to be an instrument of torture. It was Tuesday evening. Adrian was sitting on the floor of the living room, armed with a sticky lint roller, waging a losing war against the silver hairs that had woven themselves into the fabric of the sofa. "It is everywhere," Adrian muttered, peeling off a gray-coated sheet of adhesive paper. "I found fur in my sealed nutrient packs. I found fur in my toothbrush. I am fairly certain I am inhaling silver strands and slowly becoming part wolf." Rhea was sharpening a combat knife at the kitchen table. The rhythmic shing-shing sound was deliberate and menacing. She did not look up. "If you were not so soft and sticky, it would not adhere to you," Rhea rumbled. "Fenry fur represents vitality. You should be honored to be decorated by it." "I am not decorated," Adrian countered, ripping another sheet off the roller with a loud crackle. "I am upholstered." Rhea's ears twitched flat against her skull. She stopped sharpening the knife and turned her glowing amber eyes toward him. "That noise, the ripping, it is like tearing flesh. Stop it." "Stop shedding and I will stop ripping," Adrian said, feeling brave because he was 5 meters away. "I cannot stop biological functions, Hale," she growled, low in her throat. "Just as you apparently cannot stop hammering on that keyboard of yours like a frantic woodpecker. Last night at 0200 hours, you were typing so loud I could hear the keystrokes through 2 walls. Click, clack, click, clack. What were you even writing?" "A manifesto." "It was a simulation code for a grav lift stabilizer," Adrian defended himself, abandoning the lint roller. "And they represent cherry blue switches. They provide tactile feedback. It is precise." "It is acoustic violence," Rhea said, pointing the knife at him. "If you do not get a silent keyboard, I will dip that one in epoxy resin." Adrian looked at the knife, then at her serious expression. He sighed. "Fine, silent membranes. But if I buy a silent keyboard, you have to agree to vacuum the common area twice a week, with the industrial filter." Rhea considered this, weighing the annoyance of cleaning against the relief of silence. "Agreed. But if I find your circuit boards on the dining table again, I am eating them. Silicon gives me indigestion, but it will be worth it to teach you order." "You are a tyrant," Adrian mumbled, standing up. "I am a predator," Rhea corrected, returning to her blade. "You are just lucky I am a domesticated one." The domestic bickering was a relief compared to the atmosphere at the Helios Academy. If the apartment was a battlefield of fur and noise, the academy was a minefield of quiet, suffocating judgment. Adrian walked into the advanced propulsion lab clutching his datapad to his chest. He could feel the eyes on him, It was subtle a pause in conversation when he entered a lingering glance at his ID badge, where the name Hale was printed in bold, unforgiving letters. Professor Dr. Zoltan, a crustacean-like entity from the aquatic moon of Enceladus Prime, was reviewing the semester projects. Dr. Zoltan did not like humans. He found them dry, erratic, and responsible for polluting half the sector during the war. Mr. Hale, Dr. Zoltan, gurgled his translator collar, turning the wet clicks of his language into a flat, synthesized mechanical voice. Your design for the thermal exhaust port utilizes a reckless amount of shielding bypass. It is aggressive, dangerous. Adrian stood by the holographic projector, his hands sweating. It is not aggressive, Professor. It is efficient. By routing the heat directly into the auxiliary capacitors, we reclaim 20% of the energy. It is a preservation tactic, not a combat one. Dr. Zoltan's eye stalks swiveled, examining Adrian with disdain. Preservation. Interesting word choice from your lineage. Usually Hale prefers to burn things down, rather than preserve them. The lab went silent. The other students, a mix of humans, avians, and Terrans, shifted uncomfortably. This was not a critique of engineering. It was a political statement. Adrian clenched his jaw. He wanted to shout. He wanted to say that he was 22 years old, that he had been 12 when the war ended, and that he had never fired a weapon in his life. But he knew it would not matter. The math holds up, Doctor, Adrian said, keeping his voice steady. The physics do not care about my last name. Dr. Zoltan made a wet, dismissive sound. We shall see. I will review it again. Do not expect leniency. As Adrian packed up his gear, Cale leaned over. That was brutal. He is grading you on a curve, and the curve is shaped like your dad's service record. I am used to it, Adrian lied. By the way, Cale whispered, looking around. How is life in the wolf den? Do you still have all your limbs? She is intense, Adrian admitted. But she pays her half of the rent on time, and she does not steal my food. Honestly, she is a better roommate than you were in the dorms. At least she cleans up her mess. Just be careful, Cale said, his voice dropping. I saw her yesterday near the loading docks. She was in full tactical gear. Not Academy security. Real heavy armor. Black ops-looking stuff. She body-slammed a smuggler into a bulkhead like he weighed nothing. She is not just a student, Adrian. She is a weapon. The image of Rhea in tactical gear stuck in Adrian's mind. He knew she worked security, but he had assumed it was standard mall cop duty, chasing teenagers away from the fusion reactors, or breaking up drunk brawls at the spaceport bar. That evening, walking home through the lower maintenance tunnels to save on transit fare, Adrian saw something that confirmed Cale's warning. Ahead, in the shadows of a coolant interchange, 3 large figures were surrounding a smaller one. It was a shakedown. The distinct hum of plasma knives filled the air. Pay the toll or we vent your suit, one of the thugs growled. Before Adrian could even think about calling the authorities, a shadow dropped from the overhead pipes. It landed with a heavy metallic thud that shook the grating. It was Rhea. She was wearing a matte black impact suit, her silver fur pressed flat against the armor. She didn't have a gun. She didn't need one. The fight lasted 6 seconds. Adrian watched, frozen behind a pillar, as Rhea moved with a terrifying fluid grace. She caught the first thug's arm, snapped the wrist, and used his momentum to kick the second one into the wall. The third tried to run. She lunged, covering 5 meters in a single bound, and pinned him to the floor by his neck. She leaned down, her face inches from the terrified criminal. She whispered something Adrian could not hear, and the thug nodded frantically. She let him go, and the 3 of them scrambled away like rats. Rhea stood up, adjusting her gloves. She sniffed the air. Then she turned her head slowly, looking directly at the pillar where Adrian was hiding. You are breathing too loud, Hale, she called out. Adrian stepped out, his hands raised. I was just walking home. Rhea walked toward him. Up close, the adrenaline was still rolling off her in waves. Her pupils were blown wide, black holes swallowing the gold. She looked wild, dangerous. "You should not be in these tunnels," she said, her voice rough. "It is not safe for soft things." "I am not soft," Adrian said, though his voice cracked. "And I did not know you were on duty." "I am always on duty," Rhea said. She walked past him, her tail brushing against his leg. It felt like a steel cable wrapped in velvet. "Come, I will walk you to the lift. If you die on my watch, the paperwork is dreadful." While Adrian was grappling with the realization that his roommate was a highly trained combatant, Rhea was grappling with something far more complicated: her family. 2 days later, she received a summons. It was not official. It was a mark chalked onto the doorframe of the apartment building, a Fenry rune that meant pack gathering. She went to the sub-basement of the engineering sector, a place where the hum of the station's massive engines drowned out all conversation. There, in a dimly lit storage room, Karn Talvor was waiting. Karn was her uncle, her mother's brother. He was a mountain of a Fenry, his fur gray, and matted with scars. He had lost an eye during the bombardment of Moon 6, and the empty socket was covered by a crude cybernetic patch. He hated humans with a religious fervor. "Niece," Karn rumbled, embracing her. He smelled of old oil and bitterness. "You look well. The city life has not made you soft." "I am never soft, uncle," Rhea said, stepping back. "Why did you call me?" There were 2 other Fenry in the shadows, younger ones looking at Karn with reverence. "We hear things," Karn said, pacing around a crate of munitions. "We hear you are living with the enemy, with the spawn of the Butcher." "I am living with a student named Adrian," Rhea corrected, her tone neutral. "It is a tactical position. I observe him." "And what have you found?" Karn pressed. "Does he plot? Does he carry his father's hatred? Does he have access to the old codes?" Rhea hesitated. She thought of Adrian in his pajamas fighting the lint roller. She thought of him drinking too much coffee and shaking. She thought of the way he looked at the stars, not with a conqueror's greed, but with a child's wonder. "He is unremarkable," Rhea lied. "He is weak, clumsy. He has no interest in politics or war." Karn spat on the floor. "Deception. The Hales are snakes. The father played the hero while signing our death warrants. The son plays the fool to hide his ambition." Karn stepped closer, gripping Rhea's shoulder. His claws dug into her armor. "We need leverage, Rhea. The council is voting next month on the reparations bill. If we can prove the Hale boy is unstable, or if we can find evidence in his possession that links his father to the illegal targeting arrays, we can crush the human delegation." "He has no evidence," Rhea said, feeling a cold knot in her stomach. "He has model ships and textbooks." "Look harder," Karn hissed. "There is a blood debt, Rhea. Your mother. My sister. Her bones are dust on that moon because of the name Hale. Do not forget that." "I have not forgotten," Rhea said softly. But in her mind, a memory surfaced, a fragment she had pushed down for years. Her mother dying in the infirmary tent, gripping Rhea's hand. It was not him, little one. The human tried to stop it. Karn saw the hesitation in her eyes. "You are wavering. Do not let the human pheromones dull your senses. He is a tool. Use him. Break him if you must. Break him. But bring me something I can use." Unbeknownst to them, high above in the ventilation shaft, Adrian was freezing. He had been tracing a faulty atmospheric sensor that had been giving false readings in the sector. He had crawled into the duct 20 minutes ago only to hear voices below. He didn't understand the Fenry dialect fully, but he knew enough words. Butcher, blood debt, break him. He saw Rhea standing there nodding to the scarred wolf. Adrian backed away slowly, his heart pounding in his ears. He didn't make a sound. He retreated through the dark tunnels, the words echoing in his head. Blood debt. Was she planning to kill him? Was this whole roommate arrangement a long con to get close to him, to punish him for his father's sins? He returned to the apartment An hour later, pale and shaken. Rhea was already there, sitting on the couch reading a datapad. She looked up her face, calmed the monster from the basement gone. "You are late," she said. "I made stew. There is extra if you want it." Adrian looked at her, the creature, who had just discussed breaking him with her uncle. He looked at the bowl of stew on the counter. It smelled savory. "I am not hungry," Adrian whispered. He went into his room and locked the door. He pushed his desk chair under the handle. It was a futile gesture against a Fenry, but it made him feel slightly less exposed. For the next week, the atmosphere in the apartment was brittle. Adrian avoided Rhea. He stopped making jokes. He ate in his room. He locked his digital files with triple encryption. Rhea noticed the change. The scent of fear was back stronger than before, mixed with something else, betrayal. She didn't know he had overheard the meeting, but she knew he was pulling away. And surprisingly, it bothered her. The breaking point came on a Friday. Adrian was in the bathroom trying to fix the sonic shower head that had been vibrating violently. He had the panel open and was wrenching on a rusted coupling. "You are turning it the wrong way," Rhea's voice came from the doorway. Adrian jumped, dropping his wrench. "Do not sneak up on me." "I walked normally. You are just deaf," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "It is a left-hand thread. Fenry engineering." "I know how a thread works," Adrian snapped. He grabbed the wrench and twisted hard to the right out of spite. The coupling exploded. A jet of high-pressure, freezing cold water blasted Adrian directly in the chest, knocking him backward into the tub. The water sprayed everywhere, soaking the walls, the ceiling, and drenching Adrian to the bone. He sat there in the tub, water dripping from his nose, his hair plastered to his skull, looking like a drowned rat. Silence filled the room. Then, a sound erupted from Rhea. It was a bark, a deep, guttural, rhythmic sound. She was laughing. She was laughing so hard, she had to hold onto the doorframe. Her tail was wagging, actually wagging, thumping against the wall. You look," she gasped between laughs, "like a wet sock." Adrian wiped the water from his eyes. He looked at the giant, terrifying warrior, who was currently doubled over with giggles. The tension in his chest broke. It was impossible to be terrified of someone laughing that hard. "It is not funny," Adrian said, fighting a smile. "This water is freezing." "It is hilarious," Rhea said, wiping a tear from her eye. She walked over, reached out a hand and turned the main valve off with a single, effortless twist. Then, she offered the hand to him. Adrian looked at the massive paw, the black claws that could disembowel him. He hesitated for a second, then grabbed it. She hoisted him out of the tub as if he weighed nothing. "Go dry off," she said, her voice still warm with amusement. "I will fix the pipe." And Adrian, "Yeah, righty-tighty does not apply to station plumbing." That night, the wall between them crumbled a little more. To apologize for the water disaster, Rhea offered to share her dinner. It was a Fenry delicacy, seared meat, spiced with Vargos fire peppers. "It will put hair on your chest," Rhea warned. "I have hair on my chest," Adrian said, taking a bite. 3 seconds later, Adrian was gasping his face, turning a vibrant shade of purple. It burns the soul," Rhea smirked, handing him a glass of milk. "Weak." In retaliation, Adrian brought out a box of Terran chocolate truffles he had been saving. "Try this. It is a chemical compound of sugar and fat that induces happiness." Rhea sniffed it suspiciously, then popped one into her mouth. Her eyes widened. The pupils dilated. Her ears perked up. "Oh," she whispered. "This is acceptable." "Acceptable you are vibrating," Adrian pointed out. "Give me the box," Rhea commanded. "Trade," Adrian said. "1 truffle for 1 story. A real story, not a war story." Rhea paused. She looked at the chocolate, then at Adrian. She sighed. "Fine. When I was a pup, I chased a lighthopper bug into a ravine and got my head stuck in a hollow log. My father had to grease my ears with animal fat to pull me out. The pack called me Butterhead for 3 cycles. Adrian laughed. It was a genuine warm laugh. Rhea found herself smiling back. At that moment, the blood debt felt very far away. But the universe had a way of testing fragile peace. 2 nights later, the warning sirens wailed across Helios Spire. A massive ion storm had flared up on the Titan. The gas giant was throwing a tantrum, sending waves of electromagnetic radiation slamming into the station's shields. The station shook violently. The gravity plating flickered, making the floor feel like it was dropping out from under them every few seconds. The lights died, replaced by the strobing red emergency floods. For Adrian, it was not just a storm. It was a trigger. When he was 10, during the evacuation of the border colonies, his transport ship had been hit by an ion pulse. The life support had failed. He had spent 12 hours floating in the dark, watching the air scrubbers fail, listening to people suffocate. When the lights went out in the apartment, Adrian crumbled. He scrambled under the heavy dining table, curling into a ball, his hands over his ears rocking back and forth. Not again. Not again. Please. Rhea came out of her room, moving easily in the dark. Adrian, it is just turbulence. The shields are holding at 90%. It is standard. She didn't hear a reply. She scanned the room with her night vision and saw the huddled shape under the table. She smelled the terror, acrid and overwhelming. She approached slowly. She didn't drag him out. Instead, she laid down on the floor, sliding her massive frame under the table, until she was sitting next to him. Adrian, she said, her voice dropping to a soothing rumble, a sound mother wolves made to their pups. Breathe. You are on Helios. You are on the floor. I am here. Can't breathe, Adrian gasped. The air is running out. Darkness. The air is fine, Rhea said. Listen to me. She hesitated, then reached out and placed her hand on his back. Her hand covered his entire spine. She was warm, incredibly warm. The heat radiated through his shirt. When I was 12, Rhea said quietly, I was training in the north sector of Vargos. An ice shelf collapsed. I was trapped in a cavern for 3 days. No light. The cold was so deep it felt like burning. Adrian's rocking slowed slightly. He was listening. I thought I was dead, Rhea continued, stroking his back gently. But then I remembered my father told me that the ice sings before it breaks. So I listened. I listened to the darkness, and I heard the wind finding a crack. I followed the song of the wind and I dug my way out. She leaned closer, her shoulder pressing against his. Fear is the ice, Adrian. You are trapped in it. But you have to listen to the wind. Listen to my voice. I am the wind right now. Adrian took a shuddering breath. He focused on her voice, on the weight of her hand, on the solid, undeniable reality of her presence. The flashback faded. The station was still shaking, but he wasn't floating in space anymore. He was under a table with a wolf. Did you dig your way out? He whispered. I broke 3 claws, Rhea said. But I got out. Adrian turned his head to look at her in the red emergency light. Her eyes were glowing not with predatory hunger, but with a fierce protectiveness. Thanks, he breathed. Do not mention it, Rhea said. If you tell anyone I crawled under a table to cuddle a human, I will deny it. You are not cuddling, Adrian murmured, leaning his head against her shoulder. You are providing tactical thermal support. Correct, Rhea said. They stayed there for 2 hours until the storm passed and the main lights flickered back on. When they crawled out, stiff and sore, something had fundamentally shifted. Adrian wasn't just a roommate anymore, and Rhea wasn't just a monster. They were survivors. The next day, Rhea sat in her room, her datapad open. Karn was demanding a report. What have you found? Give me his weakness. Rhea looked at the blinking cursor. She typed, Subject is physically weak, prone to panic under stress. She paused. She thought of Adrian fixing the pipe. She thought of him handing her the chocolate. She thought of the way he had looked at her under the table, trusting her completely when he was at his most vulnerable. She deleted the line. She typed, "Subject shows no sign of political ambition. He is a diligent engineer. No evidence of anti-Fenry sentiment found. Recommendation: suspend surveillance." She knew Karn would be furious. She knew he would demand more. But looking at the empty chocolate box on her desk, she realized she didn't care. She wasn't going to be the monster the story demanded her to be. That night, the sky was clear. The storm had left the atmosphere of the Titan churned into spectacular bands of violet and gold. Adrian was standing on the small balcony, looking out at the gas giant. The wind from the ventilation systems ruffled his hair. The door slid open, and Rhea stepped out. She held 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to him. "Chamomile," she said. "For the nerves." "Thanks," Adrian said. He took a sip. "Rhea." "Yes." "Why did you really pick this apartment, and why me?" Adrian asked. "You could have lived in the Fenry sector. You could have lived alone. Why risk living with a Hale?" Rhea leaned against the railing, looking out at the stars. She could lie. She could say it was for the mission. But the mission felt like ash in her mouth now. "I wanted to see," she said slowly, "if the monster was in the blood." Adrian tensed. "And is it—" Rhea turned to face him. She looked at his messy hair, his tired eyes, the ink stains on his fingers. She looked at the boy who panicked in storms but shared his chocolate. "I was told," Rhea said, "that humans were cruel, that they were deceitful, that they took without asking." She took a step closer to him. The distance between them closed. The air felt charged, but not with static this time. It was something else, a gravity of their own making. "But you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You are just trying to fix things. Pipes, thrusters, people." "I am not very good at it," Adrian said, his voice barely audible. "You are adequate," Rhea said. It was high praise coming from her. They looked at each other. The golden eyes met the brown ones. There was no history between them at that moment. No war. No burning moons. Just a man and a woman, well, a female wolf warrior, standing on a metal ledge in the middle of nowhere. "I wanted to see what humans really are," Rhea finished answering his question. "And what are we?" Adrian asked. Rhea's gaze dropped to his lips for a fraction of a second, then back to his eyes. Her ears flicked back a sign of submission, or perhaps invitation. "Complicated," she said. "And surprisingly warm." Adrian felt a blush creeping up his neck. He didn't look away. "Wolves are not so bad either. Once you get past the shedding." Rhea huffed a soft laugh. The tension held shimmering like the shield grid above them. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. It was the realization that the line in the sand had been washed away, and they were both standing on the same side of the beach. "Get some sleep, Adrian," Rhea said softly, stepping back. "No storms tonight." "Good night, Rhea," he said. She went inside, leaving him alone with the view. But as the door closed, Adrian realized he wasn't watching the planet anymore. He was watching her reflection in the glass. And for the first time in his life, the name Hale didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a question he was finally ready to answer. From the shadows of the living room, Rhea watched him through the glass. She touched the spot on her chest, where her heart beat a slow, steady rhythm that had nothing to do with war. She had come to hunt a monster, but she was starting to fear that she had found something far more dangerous, a reason to forgive. The air on Heliospire tasted different on Memorial Day. The recyclers were working at maximum capacity to scrub the scent of ozone and incense from the atmosphere, but the smell lingered heavy and cloying. It was the smell of old grief. For the human population, the day was a celebration of survival. They draped the corridors of the upper rings in blue and gold banners. They polished the bronze statue of Captain Jace Hale that stood in the center of the Grand Plaza, until it gleamed like a second sun. For the Fenri, it was the night of the weeping roar. They did not hang banners. They painted white ash on their fur and gathered in the lower acoustic chambers to howl the names of the dead. It was a haunting sound that vibrated through the hull of the station, rising up through the floorboards like the station itself was mourning. Adrian Hale stood at the edge of the Grand Plaza, trying to make himself as small as possible. He wore his standard gray academy jumpsuit, hoping to blend in with the maintenance walls. He had not wanted to come. He wanted to be in his apartment hiding under his noise-canceling headphones. But the academy had made attendance mandatory for all scholarship students. "Look at him," a voice whispered nearby. "That is the son. He looks nothing like the captain. Too small, too weak." Adrian kept his eyes on his boots. He felt a hand grip his shoulder. It was heavy, and the claws pricked the fabric of his suit just enough to register. "Stand up straight," Rhea Talcor rumbled in his ear. She was not in her tactical gear today. She wore a formal Fenri tunic of deep crimson, the color of dried blood. Her silver fur was brushed to a shine, and the white ash markings on her face made her golden eyes look even more piercing. "If you slouch, you look guilty. If you stand tall, you just look arrogant. Arrogance is safer." "I do not want to be either," Adrian murmured, straightening his spine. "I just want to be invisible." "You have the wrong last name for invisibility," Rhea said. She scanned the crowd, her ears swiveling like radar dishes. "The energy is wrong today. Too much static. Too much adrenaline." The ceremony began. A human admiral, a man with more medals than chest space, stepped up to the podium beneath the statue of Jace Hale. He began to speak of honor, of the necessary sacrifices of the Shield of Terra. Adrian turned him out. He looked at the statue. The bronze face was stoic, heroic. It did not look like the man in the picture Adrian kept in his datapad. The man in the picture looked tired. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the left flank of the crowd. A group of young Fenri broke through the security cordon. They were not wearing the traditional ash. They were wearing red bandanas. "Butcher!" one of them screamed. A canister flew through the air. It struck the chest of the bronze statue with a wet, sickening thwack. Red paint exploded outward, dripping down the bronze uniform like a fresh wound. The crowd gasped. Then, the silence shattered. "Get them!" a human shouted. "Burn the statue!" a Fenri roared back. Chaos ensued. A human mechanic threw a wrench. A Fenri youth tackled a security officer. The crowd surged, a panic-driven wave of bodies. Adrian was shoved hard. He stumbled, falling to one knee. A heavy boot came down, missing his fingers by millimeters. He looked up to see a massive dock worker, raising a fist, eyes blind with rage, not caring who he hit. Then a shadow fell over Adrian. Rhea stepped between him and the crowd. She did not strike. She simply roared. It was not a scream. It was a physical wall of sound, a resonant bass note that hit the chest and forced the lungs to empty. The immediate area froze. The dock worker took a step back, his face draining of color. "Disperse," Rhea commanded. Her voice was calm, cold, and absolute. She grabbed Adrian by the back of his jumpsuit and hauled him to his feet. "We are leaving, now." "But the ceremony," Adrian stammered. "The ceremony is over," Rhea said, dragging him through a side exit. "Before the blood starts to match the paint." As they hurried through the service corridors away from the riot, Adrian looked at her. Her jaw was set tight. The white ash on her cheek was smeared. "Thanks," he said. "Do not thank me," she snapped, her voice vibrating with suppressed anger. "You humans build statues to men who burned worlds, and you are surprised when people throw paint. You are idiots. All of you." Adrian stopped. He pulled his arm free from her grip. "I did not build the statue, Rhea, and I did not throw the paint. I am just the guy trying not to get trampled." Rhea turned on him, her golden eyes blazing. "You are a Hale. That statue is your inheritance. Whether you want it or not, that red paint is on your hands too." She turned and walked away, her tail lashing violently behind her. Adrian stood alone in the gray corridor, the sound of the distant riot echoing like thunder. The tension on the station did not dissipate. It curdled. Karn Talvor sat in the dark of the sub-level engineering deck. The room was illuminated only by the holographic display of the station's life support schematics. "The paint was a good touch," Karn said to the young Fenry, standing at attention. "It woke them up. It made them remember the anger." "The humans are increasing security," the youth reported. "They are locking down the upper rings." "Good," Karn said. He traced a claw along the schematic of the oxygen exchange hub. "Let them guard the statues and the diplomats. They always forget to look at the pipes." The door hissed open. Rhea entered. She still wore her formal tunic, but she had wiped the ash from her face. She looked tired. "You summoned me, Uncle," she said. Karn turned. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on her. "I saw you in the plaza. You protected the boy." "I prevented a diplomatic incident," Rhea said stiffly. "If a mob kills a Hale on Memorial Day, the humans will not just arrest us. They will purge the station." "Perhaps," Karn said. He walked over to her. "Or perhaps you are forgetting who he is." "He is a student," Rhea said. "He is clumsy. He puts too much sugar in his coffee. He is not a warlord." Karn laughed a dry, rasping sound. "You think Jace Hale was born a monster? No. He was a man once. A man who followed orders, just like his son will." He placed a hand on Rhea's shoulder. "I have found the records, Rhea. The unredacted ones from the War Ministry." Rhea went still. "What records?" "The flight logs from the night your parents died," Karn lied smoothly. The logs were forged, a masterpiece of digital manipulation he had paid a hacker 6 months' wages to create. Jace Hale was not just the commanding officer in the orbit. He piloted the dropship. He led the ground team. Rhea's breath hitched. "No, that is not the way history says it was a bombardment." "The history is written by humans," Karn hissed. "He went down there. He looked them in the eye. He executed them, Rhea. Personally. He put a bolt through your mother's chest while she begged for the safety of her pup." The world tilted on its axis for Rhea. The memory of her mother's voice, the human, tried to stop it, flickered, and died crushed under the weight of this new, horrific truth. "Why?" she whispered. "Because they are humans," Karn said. "Because they fear what they cannot control. And the Hale bloodline is the spear point of that fear." He leaned in close. "We are going to balance the scales, niece. Tonight. The weeping roar will not just be a song. It will be a promise kept." "What are you planning?" Rhea asked, her voice hollow. "Justice," Karn said. "I need you to bring the boy to me, alive. I want him to admit what his father did. I want the galaxy to see a Hale beg for forgiveness before the end." "And if I refuse, then you are not Talcor," Karn said simply. "You are a pet to the man who murdered your mother." Rhea closed her eyes. She saw Adrian smile when he fixed the pipe. She saw the paint dripping like blood on the statue. She saw the imaginary bolt hitting her mother's chest. "I will bring him," she said. While Rhea was descending into darkness, Adrian was staring at a light that shouldn't be there. He was in the secondary maintenance bay, covering a shift for a friend who was too afraid to work on Memorial Day. He was monitoring the station's atmospheric pressure grid. "This is wrong," Adrian muttered. He tapped the screen. Sector 4, the primary human residential district, was showing a pressure variance of 0.03%. It was negligible, a rounding error. But Adrian Hale did not believe in rounding errors. He pulled up the historical data. The variance wasn't random fluctuation. It was a pattern. Every hour on the hour, a bypass valve in the oxygen mixture relay was opening for 2 seconds. It wasn't venting oxygen out. It was letting something else in. He ran a simulation. If the valve continued to cycle like that, it wasn't just destabilizing the pressure. It was bypassing the safety regulators for the volatile hydrogen coolant used in the core. If the concentration hit 4%, a single spark would not just cause a fire. It would turn the entire human residential ring into a thermal bomb. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't a glitch. It was an execution order. He grabbed his comms unit and dialed the emergency engineering line. "Central," a bored human voice answered. "This is Adrian Hale, Level 3 student technician. I am reporting a critical code red in the Sector 4 oxygen grid. Someone is bleeding hydrogen into the mix." There was a pause. "Hale, is this a prank? We are a little busy with the riots, kid." "It is not a prank," Adrian shouted, his voice cracking. "Look at the bypass valve logs on Node 6. You have maybe 2 hours before the saturation point reaches explosive levels." "Listen, kid," the operator said, voice hardening. "We have reports of Fenry hackers trying to spook the grid all day. Just reset the sensor and go home. Stop trying to play the hero like your dad." The line clicked dead. Adrian stared at the comms unit. They didn't believe him. Because of his name. Because of the day. "Fine," Adrian said, grabbing his tool belt. "I will fix it myself." He rushed out of the bay, heading for the service lifts. But when the doors opened, he wasn't alone. Rhea was waiting for him. She looked different. The warmth he had seen over the last few weeks was gone, replaced by a glacial, terrifying emptiness. "Rhea," Adrian gasped. "Thank God. You have to help me. Someone is rigging the oxygen grid. Karn or someone like him is going to blow up the residential sector." Rhea did not move. She stepped into the lift and pressed the button for the sublevels. "Rhea," Adrian asked, backing up until he hit the wall of the lift. "That is the wrong direction. The valve is on deck 12. "We are not going to the valve," Rhea said. Her voice was flat dead. "We are going to see my uncle." "What? No, you do not understand. Thousands of people will die." "My parents died," Rhea said. She turned to look at him. "Your father shot them. He looked them in the eye and killed them." Adrian froze. "That is not true. The records say—" "The records are lies," Rhea roared, slamming her fist into the metal wall. The dent was the size of a dinner plate. "Karn showed me the logs. Your father was a murderer, Adrian. And you are just the soft, smiling mask he left behind to hide the rot." "I am not a mask," Adrian yelled back, anger finally overriding his fear. "I am a person, and right now I am the only person trying to stop a massacre. Is this what you want, Rhea? You want to kill families, you want to kill me." Rhea looked at him. For a second, the gold in her eyes trembled. She remembered the chocolate. She remembered the storm. "I want the truth," she whispered, "and you are going to give it to the world." The lift doors opened. 3 large Fenry warriors were waiting. They grabbed Adrian before he could even reach for his multi-tool. "Do not hurt him yet," Rhea commanded as they dragged him out. "He needs to be able to speak." The sub-level control room was a cavernous space, filled with the roar of the massive atmospheric recyclers. In the center, Karn stood on a raised platform surrounded by screens. They threw Adrian at Karn's feet. His tool belt was ripped away. His wrists were bound with high-tensile zip cords. "Welcome, little Hale," Karn smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "You are just in time for the fireworks." Adrian struggled to his knees. He looked at the screens. The hydrogen saturation was at 3.8%. "You are insane," Adrian spat. "You are not just killing humans. The blast radius will crack the hull. You will depressurize the Fenry sectors too. You will kill your own people." "A necessary sacrifice," Karn said with a shrug. "Martyrs for the cause. When the station burns, the survivors will blame the humans for poor maintenance. They will say the Hales built a death trap, and we will rise from the ashes." Karn gestured to a camera drone hovering nearby. "But first, a message from our sponsor." He grabbed Adrian by the hair and yanked his head up. The drone's red light blinked on. Live feed. broadcasting to every screen on Helios Spire. "Citizens of Helios!" Karn bellowed. "Behold the son of the butcher. Behold the arrogance of humanity." He shoved a datapad in front of Adrian's face. "Read it, boy. Admit your father's crimes. Admit that your bloodline is poison. Beg for mercy, and I might let you live long enough to watch the end." Adrian looked at the text. It was a groveling, pathetic confession, filled with lies about his father enjoying the slaughter. He looked at the camera. He saw his own reflection in the lens, pale, bruised, terrified. He looked at Rhea. She was standing in the shadows, her arms crossed, watching him. She looked like a stone. Choose, Adrian thought. Die a liar or die a Hale. Adrian took a deep breath. He looked straight into the camera lens. "My name is Adrian Hale," he began, his voice shaking, but gaining strength. "My father was Captain Jace Hale." Karn grinned. "But I am not him," Adrian continued. "And I am not what you want me to be. I am a systems engineer. And right now I am telling you that the man holding me is lying." Karn's smile vanished. He tightened his grip on Adrian's hair. "Read the script." "No," Adrian shouted, staring at the camera. "Humans make mistakes. We have done terrible things, but we build things too. We fix things, and we do not murder innocents to settle scores from 10 years ago." He turned his head, looking directly at Rhea. "We do not kill the pack," Adrian said, his voice breaking. "We protect it," Karn roared with fury. "Enough!" He drew a plasma pistol and aimed it at Adrian's head. "If you do not speak, you will scream." Rhea watched the scene unfold. She heard Adrian's words. "We protect the pack." She looked at Karn. She saw the madness in his one good eye. She saw the finger tightening on the trigger. She realized then that Karn didn't care about her parents. He didn't care about her. He only cared about the hate. He was the storm she had been trapped in as a child. And Adrian was the wind finding a crack in the ice. The choice was made in a microsecond. As Karn pulled the trigger, Rhea moved. She didn't lunge at Karn. She lunged at the gun. Zap. The plasma bolt went wide, scorching the floor next to Adrian's knee. Rhea slammed her shoulder into Karn, sending the massive wolf flying backward into the control console. "Traitor!" Karn screamed, scrambling up. "Kill them! Kill them both!" The 3 Fenry guards drew their weapons. "Adrian, fix the grid!" Rhea shouted, drawing her combat knife. She spun around her tail, knocking the aim of a guard askew. "I will buy you time." "I am tied up," Adrian yelled, rolling behind a server rack as sparks rained down. "Improvise!" Rhea roared. She launched herself at the nearest guard, a whirlwind of silver fur and flashing steel. Adrian looked around frantically. He was bound. He had no tools. But he was in a server room. He shimmied backwards until his bound hands touched the sharp edge of a cooling fin on the server rack. He began to see the zip cords against the metal. Saw, saw, saw. It cut his skin, but he didn't care. Behind him, the sounds of battle were horrific. The crunch of bone, the whine of plasma bolts, the bestial roars of Fenry in combat. Snap. The cord broke. Adrian scrambled to the terminal Karn had been using. "Access denied," the computer chirped. "Of course," Adrian muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Brute force attack. Bypass kernel." "Adrian," Rhea screamed. He glanced back. Rhea was fighting 2 guards at once. She was bleeding from a cut on her flank, her crimson tunic torn and wet with fresh blood. Karn was recovering, aiming his pistol at her back. 3 minutes to saturation, the computer warned. "I need to vent the hydrogen," Adrian yelled. "But the software lock is hard-coded." "Bypass it manually," Rhea shouted, ducking a swing from a stun baton. "The manual release is on the other side of the room." Adrian pointed to a large red wheel on a pipe near where Karn was standing. "Great," Adrian said. "Just great." He grabbed a heavy metal wrench from the floor. He wasn't a soldier. He was a nerd who built model ships. But he was angry. He charged. "Hey, ugly!" Adrian screamed. Karn turned surprised to see the scrawny human running at him. Adrian threw the wrench. It was a terrible throw. It missed Karn's head by a meter, but it hit the fire suppression pipe behind him. Hiss! A cloud of freezing chemical foam erupted, blinding Karn for a second. Adrian slid across the floor, grabbed the red wheel, and pulled with everything he had. "Turn, you stupid valve!" It groaned. It stuck. Karn wiped the foam from his eye. He raised his pistol, aiming directly at Adrian's chest. The distance was point blank. There was no way to miss. "Say hello to your father," Karn snarled. Adrian squeezed his eyes shut and kept pulling the wheel. Thud. A heavy weight slammed into Adrian, knocking him sideways. Sizzle crack. The sound of a plasma bolt hitting flesh. Adrian opened his eyes. He wasn't dead. Rhea was standing over him. She had leaped across the gap. She stood with her back to Karn, shielding Adrian with her body. She swayed. There was a smoking, blackened hole in her left shoulder, right through the armor and the fur. "Rhea!" Adrian screamed. Rhea did not fall. She let out a low, terrifying growl. She spun around, ignoring the wound, and backhanded Karn with her good arm. The force of the blow, fueled by pain and adrenaline, lifted the massive male off his feet and sent him crashing over the railing down into the maintenance pit below. There was a sickening crunch, then silence. The other guards, seeing their leader fall and facing the berserker rage of a wounded Talcor, hesitated. "Leave!" Rhea rasped, blood dripping from her arm. "Or I will paint the walls with you." They fled. The computer chimed. Hydrogen venting initiated. Pressure normalizing. Adrian scrambled up. He didn't look at the valve. He looked at Rhea. She was leaning against the railing, sliding slowly down to the floor. Her golden eyes were dimming. "Rhea." Adrian fell to his knees beside her. He pressed his hands against the wound on her shoulder, trying to staunch the bleeding. His hands were shaking violently. "You took the shot." "Why did you take the shot?" Rhea looked at him. Her breathing was shallow and wet. She reached up with her good hand and touched his face, smearing a little blood on his cheek. "Because," she wheezed, a faint pain smile touching her muzzle. "The rent is due on Tuesday. Can't pay if you are dead." "You idiot!" Adrian sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "You giant furry idiot." He ripped the sleeve off his jumpsuit and pressed it harder against the wound. "Stay with me, Rhea. Do not you dare close your eyes. I am going to call the medics. I am going to fix this. I fix things, remember." "Loud," Rhea murmured, her eyes fluttering shut. "You are so loud, Hale." Adrian activated his comms, screaming for emergency medical assistance on every channel. "Medical emergency, sub-level 4, officer down, I repeat, officer down." Outside the control room, the station was in chaos, but the explosion hadn't happened. The air was clearing. But in the dim light of the machine room, Adrian Hale held the wolf who had been sent to destroy him, praying to a universe he didn't believe in, that the price of peace hadn't just been paid in full. The silence that followed the Battle of Sub-Level 4 was louder than any explosion. The hydrogen saturation had peaked at 3.9% before Adrian managed to override the valve. It was a margin of error so thin that it could barely be measured by standard instruments. The station had not turned into a fireball. The residential ring had not cracked open to the void. But the psychological hull of Helios Spire had been breached, and the atmosphere inside was leaking out, replaced by a cold, harsh reality. Adrian Hale sat on a plastic chair in the hallway of the Central Medical Ward. He was covered in grime-cooling foam and drying blood, most of it not his own. A nurse had tried to wipe his face, but he had waved her away. He needed the dirt. It felt like armor. Inside the isolation room, behind a wall of transparent aluminum, Rhea Talcor was floating in a regeneration tank. The liquid was a pale blue, glowing softly in the dim light. She looked smaller in the tank, her fur drifting like seagrass, the massive wound on her shoulder knit together by nanobots. "She is stable, Mr. Hale," a voice said. Adrian looked up. It was Dr. Aris, the head of the trauma unit. He was an avian, his feathers ruffled with exhaustion. Stable, Adrian repeated the word, tasting like ash in his mouth. She took a plasma bolt at point-blank range, Doctor. She should be dead. Fenry physiology is remarkably resilient to trauma, Dr. Aries said, tapping his clipboard. Her redundant vascular system prevented massive blood loss. However, the energy discharge damaged her neural pathways. She is in a deep coma. We are monitoring her brain activity. It is active. Very active. Is she dreaming? Adrian asked, looking at the sleeping wolf. More like processing, Dr. Aris corrected. The Fenry mind sorts memory by scent and emotion. Right now, her readings are spiking in the sectors associated with pack and protection. She is fighting a battle in her head, Mr. Hale. I suggest you talk to her. The auditory centers are the last to shut down. Dr. Aris moved on to the next patient, a young guard with a broken arm. Adrian stood up and walked to the glass. He pressed his hand against the cold surface. Hey, he whispered. Hey, you giant shedding nuisance. Rhea did not move, but the monitor beside the tank beeped a slight increase in heart rate. You promised to pay your half of the rent, Adrian said, his voice cracking. And you still owe me a new keyboard. You cannot just check out. That is a breach of contract. Inside the tank, Rhea's mind was a swirling vortex of snow and fire. She was back on Moon 6 watching the sky burn. But this time, the fire wasn't falling from human ships. It was coming from Karn's hands. And in the middle of the fire, standing alone against the dark, was not a warrior, but a scrawny human boy with a wrench. Adrian, her mind whispered. In the tank, her lips moved. No sound came out, but Adrian, pressing his ear to the glass, swore he heard a low, rhythmic thrumming. It was the sound she made when she was content. It was the sound of a wolf watching over her pack. The peace of the hospital did not last. 2 days later, the summons came. The High Council of Helios Spire had convened an emergency session. The attack on the oxygen grid was not just a crime. It was an act of terror that threatened the neutrality of the entire sector. Karn Talvor had been fished out of the maintenance pit broken, but alive, and was currently being held in a stasis cell. Adrian was discharged his arm in a sling, his face still bruised. Rhea was released against medical advice, largely because she had threatened to bite through the regeneration tank if they didn't let her out. She walked with a limp, her left arm heavily bandaged and immobilized against her chest, but her eyes were clear. They walked to the council chamber together. The corridors were lined with security officers, both human and Fenry. The tension was palpable. Civilians pressed against the walls whispering. Some looked at Adrian with newfound respect. Others looked at Rhea with open hostility. Ready, Adrian asked as they reached the massive double doors of the chamber. Rhea adjusted her tunic, hiding the bandages as best she could. I am walking into a room full of politicians to defend a human. I have never been less ready. Just tell the truth, Adrian said. The truth is dangerous, Adrian, she replied softly. But today, I think it is the only weapon we have left. The doors opened. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater. In the center sat the High Counselors, a human, a Fenry, and a representative from the Neutral Trade Guild. The gallery was packed. Cameras floated in the air like vultures. Karn Talvor was already there, chained to a podium in the center of the floor. He looked diminished. Without his armor, without his followers, he was just an old, scarred wolf with hate in his eyes. This session is called to order, the Trade Guild representative announced. We are here to address the attempted sabotage of the Helios life support grid. The accused, Karn Talvor, claims his actions were a justified act of war. We call the primary witnesses. Adrian and Rhea stepped onto the floating platform in the center of the room. The lights were blinding. State your names, the human counselor said. Adrian Hale. Adrian said, his voice steady. Rhea Talcor. Rhea added, her rumble echoing in the silence. The Fenry counselor, an elder with white fur and robes of state, leaned forward. Rhea Talcor, you are the niece of the accused. You are a decorated officer of the station security. Yet reports state that you struck a superior officer your own kin to protect a human. Is this true? Rhea looked at Karn. Her uncle spat on the floor at her feet. It is true, Rhea said. Why? The Fenry counselor asked. The human carries the name of the butcher. Your uncle sought to balance the scales of history. Why did you betray your blood? The gallery murmured. This was the question everyone wanted answered. Was she a traitor, or was she something else? Rhea took a deep breath. She looked at Adrian standing beside her, small, fragile, yet standing tall. I did not betray my blood, Rhea said, her voice rising. I honored it. She turned to the audience. Karn Talvor told me that to be Fenry is to avenge the dead. He told me that justice is a circle of blood. But I looked at what he was doing. He was not targeting soldiers. He was targeting families. He was going to vent the atmosphere and kill thousands of innocents, human and Fenry alike, to satisfy his own ghost. She pointed at Karn with her good hand. That is not a warrior. That is a coward with a bomb. Karn roared, straining against his chains. She has been corrupted. The human has twisted her mind. Look at him. He is the son of Jace Hale. He is poisonous. The human counselor turned to Adrian. Mr. Hale, the accused claims your presence on the station is a provocation. He claims you and your father are cut from the same cloth. What do you say to the charge that the Hale legacy is one of destruction? Adrian stepped forward. He felt the weight of every eye on him. He thought of his father's statue covered in red paint. He thought of the hidden file on his datapad. I do not know, Adrian said honestly. The room went silent. I do not know if my father was a hero or a monster, Adrian continued. I grew up with a picture of a man in a uniform and a history book that called him a savior. The Fenry grew up with stories of a demon who burned their moon. Maybe both are true. Maybe neither. He looked up at the counselors. But I know this: if we let the ghosts of dead men fly our ships, we will crash. I am not Captain Jace Hale. I am Adrian. I fix air filters. I worry about rent. And 3 days ago I watched a Fenry warrior take a bullet for me, not because of who my father was, but because of who I am. He gestured to Rhea. If a Hale and a Talcor can stand in the same room without killing each other, then the war is over. The only people keeping it alive are men like Karn, who would rather burn the future than let go of the past. HFY, a human journalist whispered into her recorder. Humanity, well, humanity and Fenry, yeah. The applause started slowly. A few humans, then some neutral species, and finally, a significant number of the younger Fenry in the gallery. Karn looked around, eyes wild. He was losing them. The narrative of the victim was slipping through his fingers. Lies! Karn screamed. Ask him about the flight logs. Ask him about the execution order. Jace Hale killed them personally. I have the proof. Then show it, Adrian shouted back, silencing the room. Show the unedited logs, Karn. Not the ones you cut and pasted in a basement. Show the full telemetry. The council turned to Karn. Do you have this evidence? Karn snarled. I have witnesses, I have memories. Memories are not data, the trade representative said coldly. We have analyzed the logs you uploaded to the public net. They are rife with inconsistencies. Timestamps that do not match. Voice prints that have been synthesized. The realization rippled through the room. The evidence that had fueled the riots was a fabrication. Adrian seized the moment. There is a way to know for sure. The official war records for Operation Moon 6 are sealed under a Class 1 clearance. They have been locked for 10 years to preserve the peace. I am petitioning the council right now to open them. That is impossible, the human counselor said. Those files are sealed for 50 years. Then unseal them, Adrian yelled. Look at us. We almost blew up the station because of rumors. If my father was a monster, let me see it. I will accept it. But if he wasn't, then we need to know that too. Rhea stepped up beside him. The Talcor Pack seconds the motion. We demand the truth. All of it. The councillors conferred. They looked at the angry populace. They looked at the hero of the hour and the warrior who had saved the station. They realized that keeping the secrets was now more dangerous than revealing them. Motion granted, the trade representative announced. The cryptographic keys will be retrieved. The files will be decrypted and presented in a closed session to the relevant parties in 48 hours. Karn slumped in his chains. He looked at Rhea, his expression one of pure hatred. You have doomed us all traitors. The truth will not save you. It will only break what little heart you have left. I will take my chances, Rhea said. The 48 hours of waiting were an eternity. Adrian and Rhea returned to apartment 4B. The door still had the scratch marks from the police drones that had breached it during the initial search. Inside, it smelled of stale air and the lingering scent of anxiety. Rhea walked to the sofa and collapsed, her injuries finally catching up with her. She looked exhausted, her fur lacking its usual luster. Adrian went to the kitchen. He made tea chamomile for him, a nutrient-dense protein broth for her. He carried the mugs over and set them on the low table. You were good in there, Adrian said, sitting on the floor near her feet. He didn't want to crowd her on the couch. I was terrified, Rhea admitted, closing her eyes. My heart rate was 180. I thought the elder was going to strip my rank. He wouldn't dare, Adrian said. You are the hero of the hydrogen valve now. They will probably put your face on a lunchbox. Rhea snorted, then winced as her shoulder pulled. If they do, I will sue for defamation. I am a warrior, not a merchandise opportunity. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the station and the distant swirl of the gas giant outside the window. Adrian, Rhea said, not opening her eyes. Yeah. In the control room, when the gun went off. You looked surprised that I jumped. Adrian looked down at his hands. I was. You hated me for 3 weeks, Rhea. You told me my name was a curse. Why wouldn't I be surprised? Rhea opened her eyes. She shifted, sliding off the sofa, until she was sitting on the floor next to him. The movement was stiff, painful, but deliberate. She leaned her good shoulder against his arm. The warmth of her body was immense, a furnace against his side. I hated the name, Rhea said softly. I hated the ghost. But ghosts do not fix plumbing. Ghosts do not share their chocolate. And ghosts certainly do not charge a Fenry warlord with a wrench to save a room full of people. She turned her head, her muzzle inches from his face. Her golden eyes were soft, the vertical pupils dilated. I did not save Hale, she whispered. I saved my roommate. I saved my friend. The word hung in the air, heavy and significant. Friend. In Fenry culture, friendship wasn't casual. It was a bond of blood. Adrian turned to face her. His heart was hammering, but this time, it wasn't fear. I thought I lost you, he confessed, his voice trembling. When you went down, when I saw the blood, I did not care about the station. I did not care about the truth. I just wanted you to get up. I couldn't stand the thought of an empty apartment. Of the silence. I am hard to kill, Rhea murmured. And I told you, the rent is due. Forget the rent, Adrian said. He reached out his hand, hovering near her cheek. He hesitated, unsure of the boundary. Rhea bridged the gap. She leaned into his hand, pressing her cheek against his palm. Her fur was soft, softer than he imagined. A low, rumbling purr started in her throat. You are warm, Adrian, she said. You are hot, Adrian replied, then blushed furiously. I mean physically, thermally. You run at a higher temperature. Rhea chuckled, a low, throaty sound. She moved closer, her forehead resting against his. It was an intimate gesture, a sharing of breath and space that transcended species. Do not ruin the moment with physics, she whispered. They stayed like that for a long time, the human and the wolf leaning on each other in the dim light of the apartment that had started as a trap and became a sanctuary. There was no kiss. The mechanics of that were complicated, and the timing felt rushed, but the intimacy was absolute. They were a pack of two forged in fire. The morning of the file release brought a new kind of tension family. A transport shuttle from the inner colonies docked at Heliospire. Out stepped Thomas and Elena Hale, Adrian's parents. They were civilians teachers by trade who had spent the last 10 years trying to live quiet lives under the shadow of Jace's legacy. They arrived at the apartment looking terrified. Elena Hale was a small woman, with Adrian's eyes and a permanent expression of worry. Thomas was tall, balding, and clutched his briefcase like a shield. When Rhea opened the door, Elena let out a small, involuntary squeak. "Hello, Mrs. Hale," Rhea said politely, towering over the woman by 2 feet. "Please come in. I have vacuumed." Elena stepped in, hugging her purse. She looked at Rhea's bandages, then at her claws, then at Adrian, who was standing nervously by the window. "Oh, Adrian," she breathed, rushing to hug him. "Are you all right? We saw the news. The explosion and the trial and—" She lowered her voice to a whisper, glancing at Rhea. "You are living with one of them." "Mom, please," Adrian said, pulling away gently. "Her name is Rhea, and she saved my life. Twice." Thomas Hale cleared his throat. He looked at Rhea with a mixture of fear and awe. "We appreciate that, truly. But Adrian, this situation is dangerous. They are volatile." "I am standing right here," Rhea said, her voice dry. "Sorry," Thomas stammered. "It is just history." "History is about to change, Dad," Adrian said firmly. "We are going to read. You need to be there. You deserve to know the truth about Dad as much as I do." Before they could argue, the door chimed again. Rhea opened it. Standing there was an elderly Fenry. He was old, his fur completely white, his back slightly hunched. He wore the simple gray robes of a chaotic monk, but his eyes were sharp. He carried a wooden staff carved with runes. Rhea gasped. "Elder Vorn." Vorn was a legend among her people. He had been her father's second-in-command, the only survivor of the ground team from Moon 6. He had vanished into hermitage after the war. "Hello, little Rhea," Vorn rasped. He looked past her, his eyes landing on Adrian's parents. "And the kin of the shield. It has been a long time." "You know them?" Rhea asked, confused. "I know of them," Vorn corrected. "I was there, Rhea, on the moon. When the fire fell." Rhea went rigid. "Karn said Jace Hale killed my parents. He said you ran away." Vorn shook his head slowly. "Karn sees only what his anger allows him to see. I did not run. I was ordered to leave. By your father. And by Captain Hale." "By Captain Hale?" Adrian asked, stepping forward. "Why would my father give orders to a Fenry?" Vorn looked at the boy, then at the parents. "Because, young one, by the end of that night they were not fighting against each other. They were fighting together." The silence in the room was absolute. "Come," Vorn said, turning to the door. "The council is waiting. The encryption is broken. It is time to let the dead speak." The secure data room of the High Council was soundproof, scan-proof, and cold. The councilors sat at one end of a long table. Adrian, Rhea, Adrian's parents, and Elder Vorn sat at the other. A holographic projector sat in the middle. "The files have been decrypted," the trade representative announced. "We have accessed the command logs of the UNS Vanguard, commanded by Captain Jace Hale, dated October 14th, War Cycle 9. We have also recovered a secondary data packet, heavily encrypted with a dual-key cipher. One key was Hale's personal biometric, the other—" The representative paused, looking at Rhea. "Was a genetic sequence matching the Talcor bloodline." Rhea's hand found Adrian's under the table. She squeezed it hard enough to bruise, but he didn't flinch. "Play it," Adrian said. The hologram flickered to life. It was a grainy tactical recording from the bridge of a starship. Captain Jace Hale stood in the center. He looked exhausted, his uniform unbuttoned at the collar. He was yelling at a screen. "I repeat, command negative on the bombardment. There are civilians in Sector 4. The targets are not military. I have confirmed visuals on hatchlings." A voice from the speaker crackled back, cold, distorted. "Order stands, Captain. The Fenri are regrouping. Burn the grid." "That is a direct order from High Command." Jace slammed his fist onto the console. "I am not burning a nursery to take out a comms tower. Belay that order." The scene shifted. A new timestamp. 2 hours later. Jace was no longer on the bridge. The camera was now a body cam shaking violently. The sound of wind and explosions was deafening. He was on the surface. Adrian's mother gasped, covering her mouth. In the frame, 2 Fenri warriors appeared. One was a massive male with silver fur, Rhea's father, Commander Talcor. The other was a female, sleek and deadly Yara. But they weren't shooting at Jace. They were running beside him. "To the train!" Jace's voice shouted over the wind. "Talcor, get the flank! Yara, shield the civilians!" "We cannot hold them off, Hale," the male Fenri roared in broken Terran. "The orbital strike is inbound." "I jammed the targeting scanner," Jace yelled back, firing his rifle at a shadowy group of soldiers. Human soldiers wearing Black Ops insignia. "They have to aim manually. It buys us 10 minutes. Get the kids on the train." Rhea was trembling. "They were allies," Vorn nodded solemnly. "There was a rogue faction in the human command. They wanted total extermination. Jace found out. He came down not to kill us, but to warn us. When his own men turned on him, he stood with the pack." The video skipped forward. The end. Jace, Talcor, and Yara were pinned down behind a pile of rubble. The evacuation train, a maglev transport filled with Fenri children, was pulling away in the distance. Jace was bleeding from a gut wound. Talcor had lost an arm. Yara was firing her last energy cell. "They are away," Yara whispered, looking at the train. "Our daughter is on it. Vorn took her." "He took her," Talcor rasped. Jace slumped against the rock. He looked at the camera, his face pale. "If anyone finds this, my name is Captain Jace Hale. I am disobeying a direct order to commit genocide. These people are not the enemy." He looked at the 2 Fenri. "It has been an honor, Commander." Talcor looked at Jace. He reached out a bloodied hand. Jace took it. "Good journey, Shield," Talcor said. Then the sky turned white. The orbital bombardment had begun. The feed is cut to static. The room was silent. Adrian's mother was sobbing openly. Thomas Hale was staring at the table, tears streaming down his face. Adrian sat frozen. The relief was a physical weight lifting off his chest. His father wasn't a monster. He wasn't even just a soldier. He was a man who died holding the hand of the enemy to save children. Rhea was weeping silently, tears matting the fur on her cheeks. She turned to Vorn. "You knew. All this time." "I knew they died together," Vorn said. "But I did not know Jace had recorded it. I thought the world was not ready to know that a human and a Fenri could die as brothers." "There is one more file," the council representative said gently. A voice memo, recorded 5 minutes before the end. It was labeled, "For the Future." The hologram shifted. It was just audio now. The wind was howling, but the voices were quieter, resigned. Jace's voice. "Hey, if you are listening to this, it means you survived. To my son, Adrian, I am sorry I won't be there to teach you how to build those model ships. But listen to me. Do not let them tell you to hate. Hate is easy. Building something new that is hard." Yara's voice cuts in soft and melodic. "And to my daughter Rhea, little wolf, do not sharpen your claws in the past. If you meet a human, look at him. Really look at him. He might be the one who helps you dig out of the ice." Jace laughs, a weak, wheezing sound. "Yeah, who knows? Maybe one day a Hale and a Talcor will share a drink instead of a battlefield." "Wouldn't that be a joke?" Talcor grunts. "It would be a good joke. An expensive rent, but a good joke. The audio clicked off. Adrian and Rhea stared at each other. The prophecy, the joke, the tragedy, it all culminated in apartment 4B. Expensive rent, Adrian choked out a laugh, tears running down his face. A good joke, Rhea agreed, her voice breaking. Adrian stood up. He walked over to his parents, who were clinging to each other. He hugged them both. Then, he turned to the council. Unseal the records, Adrian commanded. His voice was no longer that of a student. It was the voice of a man who knew exactly who he was. Publish it all. Broadcast it to every screen on the station. Let them see who the real monsters were, and let them see who the heroes were. The human counselor nodded slowly. It will be done, Mr. Hale. Rhea stood up. She walked over to the council table. She placed her hand on the wood. And release Karn, she said. The room gasped. What? Release him, Rhea said. Let him see this video. Let him see that he has spent 10 years hating the man who saved his niece. Let him live with that shame. That is a punishment worse than prison. She turned to Adrian. She held out her hand, the same way her father had held out his hand to Jace. Coming home, roommate? She asked. Adrian looked at the hand. He looked at the claws, the fur, the strength. He took it. Yeah, Adrian said. Let's go home. As they walked out of the council chamber hand in hand, the image of Jace and Talcor flickered on the giant screens behind them. Two warriors, enemies, by law, brothers by choice, watching the train carrying the future disappear into the safety of the dark. The war was finally truly over. The Grand Council chamber was a sphere of acoustic perfection, designed so that a whisper in the center could be heard in the highest gallery. Today, however, the silence was so absolute that it felt heavy, pressing down on the lungs of everyone present. Adrian Hale sat at the long obsidian table, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to stop them from shaking. To his left sat his parents, Thomas and Elena. They looked small and fragile in the cavernous room, their eyes darting nervously toward the Fenry delegation across the aisle. To his right sat Rhea Talcor. She had refused the chair offered to her. She stood a pillar of crimson and silver, her bandaged arm held against her chest, her golden eyes fixed on the blank holographic emitter in the center of the room. Behind them, the gallery was packed. Humans, Fenry avians, and the insectoid diplomats of the Trade Guild crowded every available inch of standing space. They were not there for politics. They were there for the end of a story that had haunted the station for 10 years. Elder Vorn stood by the control console. His white fur looked brittle under the harsh lights, but his hands were steady as he inserted a crystalline data shard into the reader. The history of the galaxy is often written in ink, Vorn's voice, rasped, amplified by the room's acoustics. But the truth is usually written in blood. Today, we read the blood. He tapped a command key. The air in the center of the room shimmered. The light coalesced into a three-dimensional image. It was gritty, shaking, and washed out in the harsh spectrum of combat recording, but the resolution was high enough to see the sweat on the faces of the dead. The date stamp floated in the corner, October 14th, War Cycle 9. Location, Moon 6 Surface Sector Delta. The scene was a command bunker. The walls were shaking from distant impacts. In the center of the frame stood Captain Jace Hale. Adrian heard his mother inhale a sharp, sobbing breath. The man in the hologram was younger than the picture on Adrian's datapad. He was dirty, his uniform stained with soot and orange dust. He was shouting at a comms officer. I said, get me the Admiral. They are jamming my override codes. The camera panned. Standing next to Jace, looking at a tactical map, were two massive Fenry warriors. Rhea took a step forward, her breath hitching. It was them, Commander Talcor and Yara. They were not fighting Jace. They were arguing with him, but the body language was not of enemies. It was of desperate allies. The shield generator is failing, Hale, the hologram of Talcor rumbled. His voice was deep, shaking the floor of the council chamber. "We have 20 minutes before the orbital batteries chew through the dome. We need to move the civilians now." "I know," Jace yelled back. He slammed his hand on the table. "But High Command is claiming the train lines are compromised. They are refusing to authorize the evacuation train. They think you are loading it with warheads, not children." "Then tell them," Yara shouted, stepping into the light. Her fur was matted with blood, her armor cracked. She looked so much like Rhea that Adrian felt a phantom ache in his chest. "Tell them we are surrendering the sector. We just want the young ones out." "I told them," Jace screamed. He grabbed his helmet and threw it against the wall. "They are not listening to me. General Krell has taken direct command of the fleet. He says my judgment is compromised by sympathy." The scene shifted. A jump in the recording. They were outside now. The sky above was a nightmare of purple ion trails and falling debris. Jace Hale was running a pulse rifle in his hand. He wasn't firing at Fenry. He was firing at automated Federation drones that were strafing the ground. "Cover fire!" Jace roared. Talcor and Yara leaped over a barricade, their plasma cannons roaring, blasting the drones out of the sky to clear a path for Jace. The image was undeniable. The hero of humanity and the leaders of the Fenry resistance were fighting back-to-back against the Federation's own machines. The camera shook violently as an explosion tore up the ground nearby. Jace fell. Yara was there, instantly grabbing him by the harness and dragging him behind a slab of concrete. "You bleed red human," Yara said, checking a shrapnel wound on his leg. "Inconvenient design flaw," Jace gasped, grinning through grit-stained teeth. "How is the train loading?" Talcor reported, peering over the edge of the concrete. "But the launch track is damaged. The magnetic couplers will not engage automatically. Someone has to manually lock them from the control tower." Jace looked at the tower. It was a burning skeleton of steel 500 meters across open ground. "I will go," Talcor said. "No," Jace said, grabbing Fenry's arm. "You are too big. The drones will target your heat signature in seconds. I am smaller. I run colder." "It is a suicide run, Hale," Talcor growled. "The tower is the primary target for the bombardment." Jace looked at the train in the distance. He looked at the small shapes of Fenry children being hurried into the cars. "My son is on Earth," Jace said softly. "He is 12. He likes building things. If I do not do this, he grows up knowing his father let children burn. I cannot live with that, so I might as well die trying to stop it." The recording froze. In the council chamber, the silence was absolute. No one moved. Even the air recyclers seemed to pause. Karn Talvor, who had been brought in from the holding cells to witness this, stared at the frozen image of Jace Hale holding his brother's arm. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The narrative he had built his entire life around the story of the Butcher was dissolving into pixels before his eyes. "There is more," Elder Vorn said. "The audio log. Recovered from your father's personal suit recorder, Mr. Hale." The hologram faded, replaced by a waveform on the screen. The sound of wind was loud howling like a banshee. Then voices. They sounded exhausted, the adrenaline fading into a grim acceptance of the end. Jace's voice. "Status," Talcor's voice. "The train is away. Vorn got them out. They are heading for the dark side of the moon." Yara's voice. "We are cut off. The bombardment has started. The bunker is gone." Jace's voice. "Well, that is it then. I guess I am officially a traitor to the Federation," Talcor's voice. "And I am a failure to the pack. We died in a hole, Hale. No one will know what we did." Jace's voice. "The kids will know. Vorn knows." A pause. The sound of a flask being unscrewed. Jace's voice. "Here, Terran whiskey. It is terrible, but it burns." Talcor's voice. "I have drunk reactor coolant that tasted better. Give it here." A wet cough. Jace was laughing. Jace's voice. "You know what is funny? If we survive this, which we won't. But if we did, imagine the paperwork. A human captain and a Fenri commander sharing a drink. Yara's voice. Our people would never allow it. They are too busy measuring the size of their pride. Jace's voice. Maybe not us. But the kids are Adrian. You're Rhea. They are growing up in a different world. Maybe they won't be so stupid. Maybe they will share an apartment on some neutral station, complaining about the rent, argue about whose turn it is to wash the dishes. Talcor's voice. My daughter would eat your son. She has a temper. Jace's voice. My son is stubborn. He would probably just organize her schedule until she surrendered. Laughter. Weak, pained, but genuine laughter from 3 dying soldiers. Yara's voice. It is a nice dream, Jace. A world where they are just roommates, not enemies. Jace's voice. It is not a dream, Yara. It is the plan. That is why we sent the train. To give them the chance to make the joke real. A deafening roar cut the audio. Then static. The waveform flatlined. Adrian sat there, tears streaming down his face, dripping onto his hands. He did not wipe them away. He looked at Rhea. She was not crying anymore. She was glowing. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of grief and a profound, shattering relief. The weight she had carried, the belief that her parents had been murdered by a monster, was gone. They hadn't been murdered. They had chosen their end. And they had chosen it with a friend. It was a plan, Rhea whispered, her voice trembling. It was all a plan. Elder Vorn stepped forward, pulling a sealed, yellowed envelope from his robes. He walked over to the table and placed it in front of Adrian. This was in Jace's locker on the flagship, Vorn said. He gave me the code before he deployed. He told me to keep it until Hale came looking for the truth. Adrian picked up the envelope. His hands shook as he tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in messy, hurried handwriting. To Elena and Adrian. If you are reading this, I am gone. And if the news is right, they are calling me a traitor or a butcher. Let them. Let the Federation paint me as the villain. If they blame me, they won't blame the men under my command who just followed orders. If they blame me, the Fenri will have a single name to hate instead of hating all of humanity. It keeps the war simple. It keeps the peace talks possible. I am trading my reputation for a chance at a ceasefire. It is a heavy price, but I am paying it willingly. Adrian, do not fight my ghost. You are better than me. You build things. I just broke them. Be the man who fixes the bridge I burned. And if you ever meet a Fenri named Talcor, buy them a drink. I owe their father a round. Love, Dad. Adrian lowered the letter. He couldn't speak. He handed it to his mother, who pressed it to her chest, weeping silently. Vorn turned to Rhea. And for you, little wolf. He handed her a small metallic data chip. Yara's final log. Rhea plugged it into her wrist comp. A holographic text scrolled in the air, visible only to her, but she read it aloud, her voice strong and clear. Rhea, do not hunt for revenge. Revenge is drinking poison and expecting the enemy to die. Your father and I fought for life, not death. If you find the Hale boy, do not unsheath your claws. Look into his eyes. If he has his father's eyes, he is safe. Trust Hale. He is the other half of the shield. Rhea deactivated the display. She turned to the room. She turned to Karn. Karn was slumped against the podium. He looked old, defeated. You knew, Rhea said to him. Her voice was not angry. I was just disappointed. You knew Vorn was alive. You knew there was another side to the story. But you chose to bury it. I needed the anger, Karn whispered hoarsely. Without the anger, what are we? We are just a broken pack. No, Rhea said, standing tall. Without the anger, we are free. She turned to the High Council. I withdraw all charges against the memory of Captain Jace Hale, and I petition that the statue in the plaza be cleaned. Not removed. Cleaned. And, Adrian stood up, his voice cracking with emotion, I petition that 2 new statues be added, Commander Talcor and Yara, standing next to him, exactly as they were. The human counselor looked at the Fenry counselor. They nodded. "So let it be written," the human counselor said. "The records are unsealed. The truth is public." He looked at Karn. "Karn Talvor, you are guilty of treason, terrorism, and the attempted murder of thousands. But today is a day of healing. You will not be executed. You will be exiled. You will live the rest of your days on the outer rim, where you can scream your hate into the void where no one will hear you." Guards moved to take Karn away. He did not fight. He looked at Rhea one last time, saw the resolve in her eyes, and hung his head. As the chamber began to empty, the noise returned, a roar of conversation, of reporters shouting questions of history being rewritten in real time. But in the center of the chaos, there was a quiet circle. Adrian's mother, Elena, wiped her eyes and stood up. She walked over to Rhea. She had to crane her neck to look the giant wolf in the face. She looked at the claws that could crush stone. She looked at the teeth. Then she reached out and took Rhea's hand. "Thank you," Elena said, her voice fierce. "Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for bringing Jace back to us." Rhea froze, unsure of how to handle the fragility of the human woman. She gently squeezed Elena's hand. He is a good roommate, Mrs. Hale. He cleans the dishes." Thomas Hale stepped forward, looking at Vorn. "And you saved the children. You saved the future." "We just held the door open," Vorn said, bowing his head. "It is the children who walked through it." Adrian stepped up to Rhea. The room blurred around them. It was just the two of them, standing in the wreckage of the past building, something new. "So," Adrian said, a lopsided grin appearing on his face, "my dad owes your dad a drink." "With interest," Rhea said, her tail giving a slight involuntary wag. "That is a lot of whiskey, Hale. I hope you can afford it." "I might need a loan," Adrian laughed. "Rent is due soon." 3 hours later, the sun, the real sun of the system, reflecting off the gas giant, was rising. Adrian and Rhea sat on the balcony of apartment 4B. The door was open. The sound of the station celebrating drifted up from the lower levels. It was a different sound now. Not the angry chanting of a riot, but the chaotic, joyful noise of a party. They had stopped by the plaza on the way back. The red paint on the statue was already being scrubbed away by a team of human and Fenry volunteers working side by side. Someone had placed a wreath of moonflowers at Jace's feet. Someone else had placed a Fenry dagger next to it, a sign of respect, not war. Adrian held a glass of synthetic whiskey. It was terrible. It tasted like iodine and burnt sugar. Rhea held a massive tankard of Fenry ale. "To the captain," Adrian said, raising his glass. "To the commander and the huntress," Rhea added, clinking her tankard against his glass. They drank. Adrian coughed. Rhea sighed with satisfaction. "So," Rhea said, leaning back against the railing, "the council offered me a promotion, captain of the guard." "Did you take it?" Adrian asked. "I told them I would think about it," Rhea said. "It comes with a bigger apartment in the Alpha Ring, private gym, soundproof walls." Adrian felt a sudden drop in his stomach. "Oh, that sounds nice. Quiet." "It does," Rhea agreed. She looked at him out of the corner of her eye. "But the view is terrible. Just stars. No gas giant. No storms." "And no roommate to fix your plumbing," Adrian pointed out quickly. "True," Rhea said. "And I would have to buy my own chocolate." She turned fully toward him. The morning light caught the silver in her fur, turning her into a statue of living light. The gold in her eyes was warm liquid and deep. "I think I will stay," Rhea said softly. "The rent here is a bargain." "It is," Adrian said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Best deal on the station." Rhea reached out. Her hand, large and powerful, cupped the back of his neck. She pulled him closer. It wasn't rough. It was careful, precise, and possessive. "My mother said to look into your eyes," Rhea whispered. "What do you see?" Adrian asked, not daring to breathe. I see the wind, Rhea said. I see the thing that breaks the ice. She leaned down. Adrian rose on his toes. The kiss was not like in the human movies. I was careful. There were teeth involved, and the angle was awkward, and her nose was cold against his cheek. But it was electric. It was the closing of a circuit that had been broken for 10 years. It tasted of terrible whiskey, and Fenry ale, and absolute, unshakable trust. When they pulled apart, Adrian was dizzy. Wow, he breathed. Adequate, Rhea smirked, though her ears were flushed pink inside. Just adequate. I have had better in my dreams, she teased. I will work on it, Adrian promised. I am an engineer. I optimize things. Good, Rhea said. She yawned, a jaw-cracking display of teeth that was no longer terrifying, just sleepy. It has been a long war, Adrian. I am tired. Me too, Adrian said. They went inside. They didn't go to separate rooms. It wasn't discussed. It was just gravity. They lay on Rhea's massive bed, which was essentially a field of pillows. Adrian felt small beside her, but he didn't feel weak. He felt anchored. Rhea curled around him, her body a wall of warmth and silver fur. Her arm draped over his chest, heavy and protective. Her tail thumped a slow rhythm against his legs. Adrian, she mumbled, her eyes closing. Yeah, if you snore, I will still push you off the bed. Understood, Adrian whispered. Within minutes, Rhea was asleep. Her breathing was deep and steady, a sound like the ocean. Adrian lay awake for a moment longer. He watched the light of the false sunrise creep across the floor. He looked at the datapad on the nightstand, where the file of his father's letter sat next to Rhea's badge. He turned his head. Rhea was sleeping. Her face was relaxed, the fierce lines of the warrior smoothed out by dreams. She looked peaceful. Adrian smiled. He remembered the first night, waking up to see her looming over him, a monster in the dark, checking for weakness. Now he watched her. Not with fear, not with suspicion. He watched the rise and fall of her chest. He watched the twitch of her ear. He watched the woman who had charged a gunman for him. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of silver hair from her forehead. I am watching you sleep, he whispered into the quiet room. Rhea stirred slightly, snuggling closer into his side, mumbling something that sounded suspiciously like dumb human. And I am never going anywhere, Adrian finished. He closed his eyes, the son of the shield, and the daughter of the pack, drifting off together in a bargain apartment that held the richest treasure in the galaxy, a promise kept. The war was history, the rent was paid, and the nerd and the wolf were finally perfectly at home.